Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. That Karen stepped on a freaking landmine. Maybe now she'll realize that you don't grab people at all. Like Opie said, there's very little tolerance for entitled people of any sort, so only the strongest among them survive to full Karenhood. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Karen in disguise gets wrecked by master of profanities. Allow me to welcome you to the Balkan states and culture, a place of nice food, good parties, great beaches, and people you don't want to aggravate, as we have a very high proportion of irritables that react very aggressively to provocations. Our story begins with Zan and Nikolai, real names, roughly translated to English, again with my friend's consent, but they aren't Reddit users. Zan has previously suffered an accident, hitting a rock in some shoals when paddling a raft, dislocating his elbow or something like it. The doctors treated it, and while it was okay, it was still sore when moving, so Zan braced it with a scarf in a discreet manner. Later on, Zan and Nikolai coincidentally met in a supermarket, exchanged a few words, and since this wasn't normally Nikolai's market of choice, he asked Zan where the baking powder was, and he pointed him to it. Little did he know that Zan was being preyed upon by Stealth Karen. We still don't know her real name. I say stealth because, as Nikolai described her, she didn't look like a Karen at all, but she did have an upscale haircut and an expensive-looking outfit, paired with a chip on her shoulder like she owns half the country. She goes right after Zan. Karen, boy, hey boy, your store has discount on beach balls. Tell me where they are. Clearly aggravated by her lack of manners, he responds with the same disrespect he received. Zan, I don't know. I don't care. Ask one of the employees. I don't work here, lady. Karen, don't lie to me, boy. I saw you helping that other person. Zan, still in pain from the accident and out of patience for her harassment, looks angrily right in her eyes and says, Zan, I told you I don't work here. Go away. She moves on without saying a word and eventually finds an employee to irritate, while Zan and Nikolai meet again at the vegetable section, Nikolai asking Zan about mountain salt this time. Little did he know that Karen has been paying attention and angrily streams towards Zan, saying, I've had enough of your bullcrap from you employees today. I'm going to personally drag your butt to the manager to explain yourself. Zan wasn't paying attention as Karen proceeded to grab him really hard exactly at the injured elbow when he screams in agony and pushes Karen away, and she lands sitting on the lower potato stand, left arm gripping the banana stand and right arm grabbing a hold of the orange basket. Zan went right in the face of the now poor, not dumbstruck Karen, and proceeded to yell at her like an army drill sergeant dressing down a recruit, but the language coming out of his potty mouth was so foul that it drove the whole supermarket to silence. The curses were downright sickening, like scraping up whatever was at the bottom of the cesspool with a spoon and flinging it to Karen. Please bear in mind that Balkan swear words don't translate very well, and they sound 10 times worse when spoken in our native language, but here are a few examples, slightly adjusted to match the code of conduct on this subreddit. Please note that this is Zan screaming from the top of his lungs, nursing his pained elbow. When I say I don't work here, I do not work here. Are you stupefied of the wooden crown you wear, squeezing the blood out of your brains, you thrice-fed B-word? And you wear that fancy dress, but you're not worth licking the poop off my boots. And I curse the day your mother squeezed you out. Those were just the ones that were translatable. It went on for 5 minutes, all the while Nikolai trying to get Zan to stop. A whole crowd gathered in the meantime, and when police finally came, Karen was ruined. During the outburst of Zan's profanities, Karen was too terrorized to cry. All she could do was shake, stare at him with tears streaming down her cheeks. It's only after police broke the two apart did Karen dare to break down in a full-bloom crying. Aftermath. The police reviewed the videotapes and fined Karen for aggravated assault right after taking her to a doctor for sedation. Zan was also fined for violating public order and peace, which he disputed in court successfully on the grounds of responding instinctively to Karen's assault against him. Nikolai wasn't punished. And our second story. Neighbors are trying to control the road in front of their house. About 2.5 years ago, I had to move back into my parents' house because my partner and I broke up and I couldn't afford rent. The first day I moved in, a white truck followed me down the road. About 3 minutes after, stopped in front of our house. The men inside stared for a bit, went down a little further, and turned around. I thought it was strange, and my dad swore under his breath at the sight of them. Apparently, our neighbors on the turn do it every time they see a new vehicle in our neighborhood. They go find where it's parked and tell the driver they were going too fast. Apparently, before they'd moved in and asked everyone if they could drive slowly because they have kids. That's cool, my parents understood. Then it turned into pestering every other week about driving too fast. My dad politely informed him that the speed limit is 25 and our family goes 15 to 20 miles per hour. This guy said he knows we go faster and it's way too fast. It came to a head when my mom drove home from her college class one night around 11 p.m. This guy followed her home and confronted her on the porch. She told him to F off, but he was clearly drunk or high. Driving 5 miles under the speed limit is too dangerous, but under the influence is A-okay? She went in and got my dad, who in no uncertain terms told him it's never okay to follow a woman home at 11 p.m., and that if he ever did it again, our neighbor would have my dad to deal with. He also informed him that his and his family were to never set foot on our property again. That's why they stopped when they realized I lived with my dad, and they were afraid to give me the talk. I wish that was the end of it. They claim it's because of their kids, but who lets their toddler play in the road at 11 at night? He has a company vehicle, and his daughter, the mother of the kids, has a nice car. I think they don't like the dust from the dirt road. He's frequently out spraying the road with his garden hose like 4 times a week at least. My dad says apparently they have a chemical you can mix and spray to cut down the dust. Anyway, they eventually call our HOA security on everyone on the road for speeding. It's a small town. The security guy's related to my dad somehow and asked for the real story. He went back and informed our neighbor that the speed limit was 25. Deal with it. No one's breaking any law but him by following people home. About a year ago, his daughter decided she was going to take matters into her own hands. I was driving around the turn and she was coming the opposite way in her nice little car. I slowed down to get over because it's a narrow road. She jerked it over onto my side and I had to go halfway into the grass just to avoid the collision. I was bewildered. Stopped, and she refused to move. She rolled down her window and started screaming obscenities and telling me she was sick of me driving too fast. Her kid was in the front seat, by the way. I wasn't ready to deal with a family that followed my car home, so I rolled up my window and drove my car all the way onto the grass and around her, then went to work. I immediately bought dash cams for myself and my family and had it installed before I drove home. I told my dad what had happened, and everyone got the dash cams installed. We talked about it and decided the best course of action would be to wait until we had footage because we had no proof of what had happened. Afterward, they would scream and wave their arms every time we drove by. My mom called security anyway, and they stopped their antics for a while. They have a bloodhound too. During the calm, I drove by and it was running loose. They let it out all the time, and I'm afraid to walk my dog anywhere near. I slowed down to a roll not to hit it, and I had my window down and my arm out the window. It jumped up and tried to snap at my arm. I don't slow down for that dog anymore. It scares me, and I keep my windows up. I still avoid it, though, because it's not the dog's fault his owner's an idiot. Anyway, 2 nights ago, they started again. I was coming home, and one of them had just pulled out. My car's been in the shop, so I borrowed our little used SUV. It was dark, but I believe it was the daughter. They backed out into the middle of the road, and I stopped to give them time to finish. Then she parked it in the middle again and sat there. The cab light turned on because she was opening the door. I slowly, very slowly, took the SUV into the ditch and drove around her because I refused to deal with that crazy. To be clear, she hadn't gotten out, and I gave the widest radius I could. I was still on my side and nowhere near hitting her. And being the little used SUV, it was the one frickin' vehicle that didn't have a dash cam. Now amended. Yesterday, my parents and brother were driving by and they were standing by the road. They went ballistic and just started screaming, trying to get them to pull over and wave them down. And our last story. HOA claims to own structure on my property. Please don't judge me for owning a house with an HOA. I promise you, I tried my best to avoid it, but it just wasn't possible. I purchased a house earlier this year. Apparently, when the HOA was very first being built 25 years ago, they built a structure that was intended to be used by the community, and that would require an easement on what has become my property for access. However, my plot and my neighbor's plot were some of the last to sell, and no easement was actually recorded on the deeds to these properties when that happened. Perhaps it was an administrative mistake, it's not clear. The previous owners of my home, as well as the previous owners of the neighboring home, put up no trespassing signs and had essentially been using the structure as private use shared between the two of them. When I bought the house, I was given a copy of an agreement signed between the previous owner and the neighbor, essentially giving each other easement access to the structure, it's right on the property line, and agreeing to split the cost of maintenance. That agreement did not mention the HOA's involvement in any way, and I assumed that the two owners had built the structure themselves, though now looking closely, it doesn't technically say that. I was recently contacted by the HOA explaining that they own the structure and they were hoping to resolve all this by having me and or our neighbors grant them an easement. I in no way want that to happen. I've reached out to my title company but don't even really know what to say because I'm not sure the HOA is actually making a legal claim at this point. Update. After meeting with my lawyer, I'm not required to grant an easement to the HOA. My title makes no mention of the HOA. Their fault for not recording it properly. My HOA does not own anything on my land despite what they claim. My title's what matters. Now I can just tell them to go pound sand. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.